You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of the Making of Addressing Gettysburg. My name's Peter, and I am joined in the studio with, of course, Bob Steenstra.
Hello, everybody.
And the subject of today's talk, Matt Callery.
Oh, hi, Peter. Thanks for having me on my own show.
Yeah, I know. If you don't know who I am, you have to go back and listen to part 1.
Right.
Where Matt introduces who I am, so we're not going to get into that.
We're not going through that again.
We talked a little bit about, in the first episode, about just kind of the evolution of the show.
Right.
And how you research the show, how you write it, and then just the narration. And I think it's natural to start to talk about two aspects of the show that are, I think, really what capture the attention of people. It's the music and the sound effects. Mm-hmm. So let's start with the music. I mean, anyone that watches any kind of movie or documentary knows that the music can make or break the show, and I think in this case it definitely makes it. Just talk where are you sourcing this music from?
Well, different places. It depends on what it is. Like if it's, for example, the brass band music, that's from the Federal City Brass Band. I contacted them and told them what I'm doing, and he sent me 2 CDs, and he said, just make sure you credit us.
Okay.
So I was like, great.
There it is. Here's your credit.
There it is. Yeah. And then the California Consolidated Drum Band, which they have really good quality recordings of fife and drum music on YouTube, and they say, feel free to use this, just credit us. Okay. And so I use that. And then, but the thing about, the whole thing with the narrative episodes is I really want to stress that these are people that are doing this stuff.
Right.
And this is a human story about human beings in probably the worst of human events is a war. Yet still, someone thought to bring along a banjo or a guitar or a fiddle or a harmonica and sit around a campfire and play to while away the hours. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to have that kind of music in there, but I'm not a bluegrass guy. I'm not I wasn't a I'm starting to like it, but I wasn't into that world. I don't know who the players are, and I'm not well versed on Civil War music. I mean, I know the big ones that everybody knows, but I really don't know enough about all that stuff to get what it was that I wanted. But then rather fortuitously, working at Gettysburg, I met Sarah Larson and Danny Stewart. They were there in their camper. They rented some bikes. They felt bad because they made me late. They stayed past closing, out with the bikes. But in reality, it was Bob who was.
I was just about to say I got blame for that.
Well, you were like another 45 minutes after them, so
because I was giving a tour, an excellent tour, and I wanted to give more to our customers.
Absolutely. Didn't make a dime more for those extra 4 hours that you stayed out, but whatever.
You should get a timer for Bob.
Yeah. I know.
10 more minutes, Bob.
We're going to strap that red light, green light to you and when you're out on the tour.
Touché.
But anyway, so Sarah felt bad, and she said, well, we're about to make tacos. Would you like to come over for dinner? Which was right across
in the camper.
In the camper,
okay.
Yeah. So I was like, yeah. So I go over there, and we have dinner, and we get to talk, and I find out that they're bluegrass musicians. And really? I go, oh, well, I'm working on this podcast and blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah, we'd love to. So then they go and they listen to it. And a couple of weeks later, Danny texts me, and he's like, we loved your podcast. We definitely would like to do music for this. So I was like, great. So a month or so after that, they get in touch with me. They're like, we're coming up to the area for a couple of gigs, and we'd like to use Gettysburg as our hub. Can we put our camper in your driveway? So I was like, of course. Because now I'm going to use you for everything you're worth. and so we hung out the whole weekend. I brought him out on the battlefield at sunset at the peace light, and they started playing. A little crowd gathered and everything. And then the next day we went. I took the recorder into the camper, and we started recording music.
Now, what instruments do they play?
Guitar, banjo, fiddle. mandolin.
So everything,
anything with strings,
gotcha.
They can play it. Yeah, Danny is the bassist in the Marine Corps country band, not Marine Corps, sorry, Navy country band. Which I didn't know that the Navy had a country band, and I said to him, "Man, if I knew this, I would have joined the Navy, not for country, because they have a rock band too." But yeah, so so he does that. And she's like a singer-songwriter
traveling
type. She just goes around. Yeah, she teaches. She's fantastic, and
and at the spur of the moment, sometimes Matt and I were walking over Culp's Hill just this week, and tell the people what happened.
We were walking over Culp's Hill, and we were doing a live video from there. And who requested to chime in? But Sarah Larson. So I accepted it, and she was there. She's like, "Hey, hi," a lot of small talk and stuff. And she goes, "Listen, I thought it might be nice while you're walking around the battlefield if I play some Civil War music for you." So we're like, okay. And so she started playing.
So you had live background music as you were walking the battlefield.
Yeah, and I think this is the one that she played. Let me see here. I can give you a taste of it. She called it Arkansas Traveler. I'm not sure if this is it, but I don't have it marked as that.
Yeah, this is Arkansas Traveler.
Is it? What the hell do you know?
Matt, it was more stately than that, because
that was the second song.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is her playing right now.
So that's her playing now.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, not at this moment.
No,
this is
it's a recording.
Yeah. Now, so that was recorded in a camper with people mowing their lawns in the background.
All right. So in the most recent narrative episode, there is a violin part. It's this haunting melody behind, and it's become kind of the theme of Addressing Gettysburg.
Yeah, and that's an interesting story, too, because I wanted to... I mean, I'm not making any bones about the fact that I'm totally ripping off the Ken Burns style,
Absolutely.
Right? And so, of course, if you're going to do like the Ken Burns thing, you got to have a Shokin farewell, but you can't take a Shokin farewell because that's,
You can't totally rip it off.
Yeah, I mean, come on. You got to leave something.
He ripped it off. I'm sure he paid for it, but he ripped it.
Well, yeah,
it was not written for the PBS documentary.
No, right, exactly. And so, it was just a piece of music that he had heard. He knew Jay Unger, and I think he was over his place, and he was going through music that he had written, and he heard that, and he's like, "That's it." And so, I was like, well, my show has to have a theme. Like, it's got to have a theme. It's got to be moving. It's got to be pretty. But I don't know. I can't write it. I don't know. And then if I could write it, I don't know how to play violin or anything like that. And I said, and I can't ask somebody to write it for the purpose of being the theme to my show that is in the vein of a Shokin farewell, because then it will come off as too much of a ripoff. Mm-hmm. So while we were recording in the camper, Sarah keeps referring to this bear waltz this, bear waltz that, bear waltz Danny, bear waltz Danny. And I'm like, what the hell is this bear waltz? What are you talking about? She goes, "Oh, it's a song I wrote a few years ago." And I said, "Play it." And she played she played 4 notes of it. And I said, "Stop, we're going to record it. That's my theme song." And then that was it. That was the theme song. And then I had her do it a whole bunch of different ways. So the first way is this here. Let's see. Where is it?
While you're looking for it, so we were on the Instagram this week. This was what was being played as Matt was waltzing Bear down the road.
That's where the name came from.
Yeah, right. Okay. So here it is. Sorry. Pretty, and it is, and I said, but it needs to be slower. You need to do it slower because it needs to be sad as well. So then I had to do it slower, and I added reverb to it, and I took the guitar out. Kind of reminds me of Braveheart.
Yeah.
Right?
It really captures the pathos.
Whatever that is, yes.
Explain that to the listeners that don't know what that word is.
Yeah. Pretend I'm a 5-year-old and explain that to me.
It's the feeling I always get after hearing one of Matt's jokes.
So now I have 2 different ways to do it. And what I did in the beginning of episode 2 was I blended the 2 together. So I started off slow, and then and like there's a purpose to all these things. Like if you listen here, I'll go towards the end of it so that you can hear the transition, and I'm just going to solo those 2 tracks so you can hear how the music kind of blends in. Right, so then it goes into the normal speed, right? And that coincides if you put it in now with the narration. You're kind of talking about things that are very sad and depressing and melancholy, but then suddenly it's spring and the Confederate Army's on the move up north and they're going to get some food in their bellies and equipment in their wagons and all this other stuff. So then
General Abner Doubleday, while on the road to Gettysburg, I was not hurt by a shell, and I was not drunk. For once, I lost confidence in Hooker, and that is all there was to it. After Chancellorsville, while Hooker was looking for ways to redeem himself, Robert E. Lee was setting the wheels in motion for his second invasion of the North.
So that's how that went there. But now,
well, just before we get off of this song and Sarah and Danny,
right,
just briefly talk about what's going to be happening on April 18th.
Oh, okay. So April 18th is the first Get Out of the Car tour of 2020. And we're going to do it's also coinciding with our Adopt a Position cleanup, which, is a cool thing, which we'll get into another time. But after we do the tour and the cleanup from 10 to 12, then, there's a bit of a break. And then in the evening, we're going to go, actually 4:30, they're going to do a show over at Mason-Dixon Distillery, the music of Addressing Gettysburg. So it'll be these songs that they've done for Addressing Gettysburg. Hopefully I'll be able to record them doing some more for future episodes. And then after that, then they're going to be playing for about 2 hours for the general public, just doing bluegrass music.
Nice.
Yeah, so it'll be fun, and that's at Mason-Dixon.
And if you're
April
listening,
18th.
if you're listening to this after April 18th, you've missed out.
Yeah.
And look for the recording of it if we were able to do that.
Yeah, we'll record it.
But also follow us on all the social media because these events are going to be happening. But we're going to talk about that in
But
part
also,
3.
if you're listening to it after April 18th and it's still before October, every month we do something on the third Saturday of the month. So.
Okay.
April through October.
So the music, is there any other contributors that you'd like to mention?
Oh yeah. Well, so then let's see here. This one is from episode 1, the Antietam to Fredericksburg one. So and I think for the part with Chamberlain reading about sleeping on the hill. I think it's more of, I consider this more of a tip of the hat to Ken Burns because I do a lot of the same stuff. Like there's a wind in the background, which he did, but I don't think he added this. And there's a certain point where he talks about the sounds of the men are making, the different moans and different things. And so then I have this come in, but this is Pearl and her mom doing Lorena, and I just kind of made it. Well,
so this is Pearl Shannon, the actress,
and
who
Kelly Shannon,
is her mother.
Yeah, and she's a musician.
And explain Lorena.
Lorena was a song that was very popular back then. I think on both sides, right? It was like a very popular love song, and it's one of my favorite songs. And if you watch old John Ford movies, he puts it in everything. Like it's in almost, I mean, he somehow has it in there, and it's rearranged differently, but it's like it's in the Horse Soldiers, it's in the Searchers, there's a few others I can't remember off the top of my head.
Hear it.
Yeah, so Lorena, very pretty, it's haunting, so I wanted her to just ooh and ah it. Just we'll let the guitar play a bit here. Look at this out. And the reason I wanted this to be there, well, actually, I'm talking over it. It's this part. It's the very sad.
Mm-hmm. Where did you record this?
Tammy's house, in the barn.
So in a barn that was a Civil War hospital.
Yeah.
It's just, the reason why I say it is because this is the most Gettysburg podcast.
Well,
I'm not trying to compare to other Gettysburg podcasts, but I'm just saying it's done by people who are interested in this place and interested in the history.
It's a collaborative effort amongst,
and it's recorded here in Gettysburg in places like a Civil War barn. Yeah, Civil War era barn that was used as a hospital. It's just, I mean, it's just bigger than what you hear.
Oh yeah,
on the podcast,
yeah.
And that's really special. Like, there's not a lot out there that you can say that about, and this is it.
Yeah, it's a I'm trying to entertain first. Like in the first episode, I mentioned something about there's a psychology to what I'm doing. The psychology is, hopefully someone who maybe is like kind of interested will be like, give it a chance or stumble upon it in some way. And they'll find the narrative episodes and they're like, wow, that was really, like my mother, for example, couldn't care less about any of this stuff. Okay. Mm-hmm. But because, she wants to see what her son is doing, she listened to it and she called me after the first episode and she goes, I couldn't believe that was you. She goes, that was wonderful. And it was very interesting. I had no idea. and I go, well, I've been trying to tell you for years. But it's because it wasn't presented to her ever in the right way. And so it always was boring to her. And there's millions of other people out there who feel the same way. That history is boring because the people who have shown it to me are boring. But most people either don't care enough or maybe they're not deep thinkers enough to realize that that's what it is. It's not the subject. So when you present it to them in an interesting way that touches them, and that's why you use music and that's why you use sound effects. It's not, gimmicky. It's emotional. It's to try to convey an emotion or provoke an emotion out of someone.
Can I jump in for a minute?
Yeah.
Matt, I hadn't thought about this before, and I don't know if it was intentional on your part or just native genius.
Well, just stick with genius. Okay. If you have to guess.
The Aurora Borealis, which seldom is seen that far south, Fredericksburg. Right. It's December of 1862. Mm-hmm. The soldiers saw it that night, and as you were just playing it, I just couldn't help but think it almost sounds like what I pictured.
It's ethereal. Well, I wanted it to be ethereal. Yeah, and so there's guys that are dead or dying laying there. And the reason I picked Lorena and I wanted a female singing it was because Lorena's a love, right? Mm-hmm. It's someone singing to his love.
Sure, that's what they're thinking.
But the melody is just so haunting and beautiful that who are these guys thinking about as their life is passing? Their wives, their sweethearts, their mothers. Women. Mm-hmm. They're not thinking, man, I'm going to miss dad. No. They're thinking, man, I want my mommy.
Yeah, just before the battle, Mother is one of the more famous songs.
Who are they always crying for when they're laying there with their guts hanging out? Their mothers. So,
but I think to Bob's point, even the recording sounds like it's coming from the heavens.
That's why I added the echo, because I wanted it to sound like it's just kind of in the ether.
Brilliant. Yeah. Are you going to play the whole thing with the narration too?
I don't have that queued up.
Okay.
You'll just have to go back, ladies and
I'll have to
gentlemen,
listen to
narrative
it again.
episode number 1. Okay, but now there's another thing. So you talk about barns. So we went down to Pearl and her mom, Kelly. They're friends with the owners of the Battlefield Bed and Breakfast.
Okay.
So they have a big barn too, which they use for receptions and stuff.
And that's a bed and breakfast that's basically on the battlefield, correct?
No, they're, I mean, I think it was Kilpatrick's headquarters or something like that.
What are we talking about? Tammy's?
Battlefield Bed and Breakfast.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it's something
just
like
south
that.
of the current national park, though, and
it's
certainly
south of South Cavalry Field.
Yeah.
So I mean, there was things that were being staged from there or whatever, but it was used as a hospital as well. There's still holes in the floorboard that they drilled to drain the blood that you can see, and people get married on that now, which is weird to me. But anyway, so. Like, imagine having your first dance on the floorboards that are stained with blood, whatever. So they let us use the barn to record. And, so we're recording in there, and it's great because there's this really cool echo to it, but there's birds chirping. And there's sound-wise, there's lots of ways to play with the sound of a big cavernous room like that. So one of the many instruments that Kelly Shannon plays is trumpet and flugelhorn and things like that. So I had her do a couple things which will appear later on. But like I would have her do the same song a couple times, and I would move the mic to a different part of the room. So like this is Maryland, My Maryland on trumpet. Right, so that's with the microphone kind of close.
Isn't that "Oh Christmas Tree"?
Yes, yes.
same tune.
Now here it is with me, like with the microphone on the other side of the room.
Yeah, totally different feel.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. And then another one that's popular, Shenandoah. And I like Shenandoah because, especially on trumpet, because it kind of reminds me of the JFK theme song. Did you catch that? But also now, so here's a thing with that too, recurring themes. So there's Shenandoah on trumpet, but then we also have it on fiddle. So you get different feels. It doesn't get stale. It's one thing to hear the same melody over and over again, but if you're changing the instrumentation and the player, there's a different interpretation of it, and you record one in a camper and one in a barn, you're going to get a lot of different feels, and that's what you need because there's lots of different emotions that you need to try to convey. And then of course sometimes you just need some that's like really good for knee slapping, like a good old.
You should see Matt dancing now.
Now, I noticed there was banjo.
Yeah, well, like here's a... You hear it?
Mm-hmm.
So then another guy that we have is a guy that I found on Instagram. His name is Dusty Lee Elmer, and I think he just records these because he's up in upstate New York, and I think he just records these on his iPhone. I don't know what he does, but there's some of the banjo stuff that you hear. He actually uses an old gut string, which kind of is cool. That adds to the whole thing. But here's a song that everybody knows and loves.
I mean, just like to recap, we've got the research, the narration, the music, and I think the another thing that really sets it brings the show to the next level are the sound effects.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of these battle scenes that you've done have been, I mean, the response has been, lifelike. They're realistic. It really paints the picture of the story, and it really is this, I don't know, this clamor of noises.
Yeah.
That sounds like you staged an actual cavalry battle and just held up some microphones and recorded it. But obviously, that's not happening.
No,
so
that would be awesome.
It would be a lot easier, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me about that process. I mean, how many different layers of sound are there? Where are you getting these sounds from? How are you putting it all together to make it
let's take, for example, the Battle of Brandy Station here. So what I'll do is I have the narration of the Battle of Brandy Station. So I'll create, and this is maybe a little too more technical, but I have a master editing, sequence, let's say, okay? Or in the editing software, I have a master editing file. Let's put it like that. And that's where the whole thing, when it's all finished, is going to go. But for certain things, like a battle, you're going to have layers and layers and layers and layers of sound that are put on tracks. And it's just going to get too confusing and convoluted when you try to do that in the master. So what I do then is I create a new one that is just the Battle of Brandy Station. I move the, narration over to that. And then I start building the sound effects. So let me just make a mark there. And then, so like, for example, the beginning of Battle of Brandy Station is just kind of ambiance. The Battle of Brandy Station. And I announce it.
The only time in my 14-month service.
Now you see, you can hear that it's kind of uneven. It's not mixed right. Okay, because this narration here is going to go in the master, and that's where I add all my EQs and everything like that. So it's going to be very
more of a
flat.
This is
very raw.
Yeah.
It's very unmixed. But this is the idea.
General Stewart, that he seemed rattled was when Frank Dean, one of his couriers, dashed up and told him that the Yankees were at Brandy Station. This was startling indeed. Frank Robertson, General Stewart's staff.
No fires were allowed.
So that's like how we started there. It's just, I'm trying to set the scene and, give you the feel of, where we are, what it is, what time of year it is. Like, that's the other thing too, is the time of year. That's what your sound effects can help you do if you don't want to say, on June, time of day, time of year. Yeah,
just people associate crickets with nighttime.
Exactly. And cicadas with summer. Although Bob pointed out to me that cicadas don't come, you wouldn't have been hearing cicadas at the time of the battle because they come later in the season. Is that right?
At least up here, early June.
Well, that's
Brandy
where the battle
Station
was, yeah.
Well, Brandy Station.
No. We're talking about July.
Come out that early there, right?
Yeah.
They do.
So now we'll get into the Battle of Brandy Station. So, you got your atmosphere, your ambiance, whatever you want to call it. You got to have that in there, and that's always kind of underneath, even though most of the time you don't hear it. It's still there. But then you have to get your sound, your battle sounds, your horses and everything. And the Brandy Station was very hard to do because you have to get horses. You got to get the sound of horses in there, but these are horses that are terrified. I don't care how used to being in the service they are. When they're running towards another mass of horses, and they don't want to, but you're still spurring
Everything
them on.
in their brain is saying
No,
we shouldn't be doing this.
Right. Yeah. And we're doing it, and then they're getting nicked by bullets. They're getting stabbed with sabers, and so what do? They scream. And if you've ever heard a horse's scream, because we used to ride horses and stuff. I mean, have you ever heard one that's actually like scared? It's spooky. It's kind of like a banshee type of scream. Like, it's a scary sound, and it's clearly an animal in some type of distress, and it's not fun to listen to, especially if you love horses like I do. So, that gets me more than the sound of a human being suffering. Although a human being suffering gets me, but an animal, because we've had this conversation before, Bob, the animals are innocent in this whole thing.
Right.
They're dragged into the whole nonsense. It's our stupidity that makes these animals, get killed and die. So I want people to, this is a very anti-war thing, this whole thing. and not in like a hippie Vietnam kind of way, but just like an anti, let's not do this again type of war thing. And people don't get affected by human suffering like they should. So I have to make them feel bad about the animal suffering. So I had to go and find all these sound effects. So YouTube is a great place for finding this stuff, because the things that people will put up there are amazing.
So there's people that have recorded horses in distress.
Well, yeah, because and it's not like they're hurting them.
Sure.
It's and sometimes, it's a horse, frolicking in the corral. So I go, well, let's see what happens here. So I just, play it and I listen, and, it's something like at one point, like a leaf blows across the corral and it scares the horse and he screams like he's scared. And I go, there it is. That's perfect. So then I'll save it. I'll rename it so that I know why I have that. And then I'll go and I'll find that one little stupid thing when I'm editing, and I'll put that one scream in there amongst others.
Can you play just some? Do you have?
Yeah. Let me solo my horsies here. Let's see. So here's an example of some horses in distress.
And multiply that times, how many horses involved in the Battle of Brandy Station?
Right.
No,
yeah, and obviously,
what's a ballpark number?
Well, you had 20,000 cavalry or 20,000 Union infantry. Wait, what am I trying to say? Total of 20,000 Union and Confederate,
though.
And some was infantry.
Yeah, I don't have a quick answer to that, Pete, but I would say in excess of 10,000.
Yeah, more than that. Yeah,
horses alone.
Right. Horses.
Well, yeah, because Stewart had about 9,000 or so, and then Pleasanton had about 11.
But they're not all at the same place at the same time.
Correct.
Right.
No, but let's just say that you have 1,000 in one spot, right? I
can't even imagine.
No, I can't either. But I'm not going to be able to go and put 1,000 horse ninnies in there, because it would just sound like noise, right?
Right, and no one person is going to hear the whole battle happening. Right. So you're kind of putting yourself in one spot and you're listening to it.
Exactly.
But one thing that got me listening to this episode, most Civil War movies that you see are infantry. There's I can't think of one that has a massive cavalry battle.
Civil War, Ride with the Devil got a pretty good one.
But weren't they smaller bands?
They were, but there's one pretty decent sized one though towards the end. But otherwise, yeah, you're right. It's not.
So you don't think about, usually it's lines of troops shooting rifles at each other.
Yeah.
And here's horses, they're running into each other with sabers drawn.
Right.
So you've got this clinking of sabers, the shooting of guns, the horses hitting each other. It sounds medieval. And this happened 50 miles away from here.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and that's the so now you mentioned the two masses of troops or cavalries going towards each other here. So let's see. So let me give you this here. Now there's a little bit of, now again, this isn't mixed yet, so you're going to hear the narration's going to be a little muffled and everything, but we're going to have all this other sound effects in here as well. So I'll show you how it will go. So we'll layer. We've got the narration, and then I'll give you the first layer of sound effects. Colonel Sir Percy Wyndham deployed skirmishers and returned battery fire. Gregg ordered Wyndham's brigade to charge up Fleetwood Hill's western slope.
Not 50 yards below, Colonel Percy Wyndham was advancing the 1st New Jersey Cavalry in magnificent order, in columns of squadrons, with flags and guidons flying. Major Henry McClellan.
Okay, so that's just one track of sound effects there. Mm-hmm. So now we'll listen to that other part again, and now we're adding carbines. Percy Wyndham deployed skirmishers and returned battery fire. Gregg ordered Wyndham's brigade to charge up Fleetwood Hill's western slope.
Not 50 yards below, Colonel Percy Wyndham was advancing the 1st...
So you get the idea there. And then now, what is this that we add here? Now, okay, the men, they're going to be making some noise. So we got them now. Percy Wyndham deployed skirmishers and returned battery fire. Gregg ordered Wyndham's brigade... And now... There's two sides firing at each other, so we're going to have more carbines in there. Wyndham deployed skirmishers and returned battery fire.
Greg ordered Wyndham's brigade to charge up Fleetwood Hill's western slope.
Not 50 yards below, Colonel Percy Wyndham was advancing the 1st New Jersey Cavalry in magnificent order.
So now the thing is, because there's so many of these different layers and tracks and everything like that, I have to then mix that all down to just one soundtrack, which then I have more control over, because I can go in and put it into the final mix under my narration, and then if there's a certain part that's just a little too loud, instead of going in and lowering 8 different tracks worth of sound effects, I can just do it once in that one spot that I have to do. So then that will then come together and sound like this here.
Meanwhile, McClellan found that his bluff had worked. Greg's lead brigade under British soldier of fortune, Colonel Sir Percy Wyndham, deployed skirmishers and returned battery fire. Greg ordered Wyndham's brigade to charge up Fleetwood Hill's western slope.
Not 50 yards below, Colonel Percy Wyndham was advancing the 1st New Jersey Cavalry in magnificent order, in columns of squadrons, with flags and guidons flying. Major Henry McClellan.
Simultaneously racing to the scene at full gallop from the opposite slope of the hill were Grumble Jones's regiments, the 6th and 7th Virginia.
So this part here, how do you get the sound? Because you read these accounts of these battles and you hear about what it sounds like when 2 regiments of cavalry smash into each other. Well, I can't get reenactors to go out into a field and do that, because they don't want to hurt their horses or themselves, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
But how do I get that sound? And if you've ever heard horses slam into each other, it's a pretty substantial thump. And
I mean, anyone who's ever hit a deer with their car.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a deer. That's horses.
Horses are big.
3 times the size of that.
So now imagine 350 against 350 or so horses slamming into each other like that, and all the other sounds that come along with that. You know, you're going to have the impacts, you're going to have the sound of men in Mortal Kombat screaming at each other, the horses screaming in fear, the clanking of guns, sabers, and the shooting of guns and all that other stuff. But so I really want to get that, because I used the description here that somebody gave, that it sounded like a dead heavy crash, which is a great descriptor. But what does that mean? Or description? What does that mean? What does that sound like? How do I make that sound? Now, there's Foley artists that could go out there and make that sound if they wanted to, but I don't know. I don't have the time or the patience or the wherewithal to do that. So I go, well, I got to think. Well, I notice, like, in a lot of war movies now, they'll use whooshes and impact sounds that you'll see in a lot of, like, reality shows, or just these little transitional things, and they'll put them in with the sound of an artillery shell exploding, and it's just really, when you're in the theater, it's just it gives you that punch in the chest. Okay. So I go, why don't I go and I'll find some royalty-free sound effect thing that has those whooshes and impacts, and I'll make that sound, but it will be cinematic. It'll remind the listener, even like subconsciously, this is something that sounds professional, because like I've heard it in this sound in Hollywood or something like that. So here's that part.
Simultaneously racing to the scene at full gallop from the opposite slope of the hill were Grumble Jones's regiments, the 6th and 7th Virginia Cavalry. Just as Carter's lone howitzer had exhausted its ammunition, Jones's men crowned the heights and plunged over the opposite slope into Wyndham's men with what one veteran called a dead heavy crash. Wyndham's cavalry split Jones's charging battalions like waves on the bow of a ship, according to the adjutant of the 1st New Jersey, Marcus Kitchen.
And then it comes back in. So it's like kind of like in Private Ryan, when the shell goes off by Tom Hanks, and the sound goes out and you can't hear anything, and then all of a sudden it comes back, and it comes back with a whoosh, and now it's all very real and in your face.
I just pictured the half a second before the clash, it just stops.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And then the narration happens, and then it's back into it.
Yeah.
That's reminiscent of something I saw in Hamilton too. I think that's really cool.
In the play?
Yeah, in the play.
Like on stage? What did they do?
I can't remember, but it was
too.
You know, they have the duel, right? But there's time that's almost standstill.
It's when when Hamilton actually gets shot,
right?
And you hear the and it stops, and he's going through basically like his life is flashing before his eyes.
It's like, why did I do this? I'm so stupid.
Well,
not quite, but yeah, that's what it is.
I had an appointment today.
No, yeah, that's actually very good.
Well, yeah, and okay. I mean, I'm not saying I invented this. I'm clearly using something that's used in all types of productions and stuff. But again, this is like something that, you know, all these years where I have not been too successful in production, I still learned these things, and now it's kind of paying off onto something that I love. So
I like that, Matt, and I liked your explanation for it.
Thank you, Bob. Which explanation?
Just the modern show is going poof. I can't remember what you said.
Yeah.
How you said that.
Yeah, the transition.
And then it all kind of comes back together, and we're back. That's cool.
Yeah. So once the two regiments have engaged and they've made contact with each other, like, what does that sound like? There's no more hooves, you know, because they're not running; they're standing there or whatever. And now they're fighting. Well, sword fighting, you know, like I had to get like really clever to like find all these different things and blend them together to make it sound like there's actual, you know, fighting going on. To the point of like banging a couple of my kitchen knives together. I have this one kitchen knife that has this beautiful ring to it, so I just kept whacking it with the honer. And you know, what is that a honer? What do they call that thing?
Yeah, diamond steel.
Yeah. And you know, just a couple times like that, and you know, you can find these different things. I have a cavalry saber, so I would, you know, draw the so then now I'm like describing all the different sounds that you might hear, you know, as if I've ever been in a cavalry fight, but I'm using my imagination, saying what we might hear, and so then I have to find the sound effects to go with them. But here's what I'm talking about.
Entangled with two Confederate brigades. As the dust swirled around the mass of men and horses, so too did the sounds of mortal combat. The guttural gulps of men as they receive a saber blow or a pistol shot to the abdomen. The shrieks of frightened and wounded horses. The pop, pop, pop of revolvers sending their deadly projectiles toward a foe only a few feet away. And the clanging and scraping of sabers. Wyndham's brigade.
So, you know, and then you get those and all those noises and everything. And that's a trade secret as to where those came from. But go ahead. Would you have a question now, Peter?
Oh, well, I mean, so you either found these sound effects, you made them yourself, but you told me a story about just about one particular way that you sourced some sound effects.
Oh, yeah. So a friend of mine, Ty, he goes down to the, what is it again? North-South
Shooters Association.
Skirmish Association, yeah. And they fire live Civil War weapons, like fire live rounds out of Civil War weapons, including artillery. So he went and he has a couple of recorders like I do, and he went and he recorded them, and so a lot of in episode 2 here, a lot of the sound that you hear, the carbines during the fighting here, later on during the Battle of Second Winchester, you hear muskets, and you hear the whizzing of bullets and things like that. That's all real. I remember you said after you listened to it, you thought that I had gone and found the whiz of a bullet and then inserted it in all those different places, but that's not true. That is the sound of the bullet whizzing past the recorder.
Wow.
He got permission to put them down range and would face them at different things. But one of the things which I love, because I like artillery, is he was able to get artillery.
So, folks, this is not the kind of sound you're going to hear at a reenactment, because they're shooting just blanks.
Right.
This is real projectiles.
This is right. These are, and I believe he said these were Parrott guns. I'm not sure if it was a 10 or a 20 pound. Well, let's see here. Now, this is the raw footage here, so let me just. Yeah, there you go. So you hear, and I believe that he is to the side of the piece. They wouldn't let him put it down range.
Right.
And he's going again in May. And I said, you better put me in touch with whoever it is, because I need it down. I need to hear that, that whiz. But these are what cannons would have sounded like if you were standing to the side. So you hear that explosion, and then you hear the echo, the shockwave traveling away from you. And then, there's things in there like airplanes and guys on PA systems. Can you hear them in the background?
Yeah. This is the recording from
So I got to, work to either hide those or get rid of those. But
in the clamor of battle, you're not going to hear that.
No, exactly. That's the idea. But then, there's a lot of stuff. People put a lot of stuff from reenactments online and on YouTube. And that's where the vast majority of the battle sound effects come from. And then I just mix them together. And this is like an old, distant artillery battle. Mm-hmm. Some of them aren't even really Civil War, if I'm being honest with you. This one, I think, is my... I
mean, they're not. You're never going to be 100%, but the fact that you're getting some of these, really curated, authentic, sounds that are original to this podcast, it just...
Right.
Again, it's what puts it to the next level.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
From beginning to end, how many hours are you putting into one episode? Have you ever taken the time to figure that out?
I counted in months. It takes 6 months to do an episode.
6 months.
Yeah.
But, I think this really explains why. It's not that, Matt's just being lazy or Matt...
No.
There's so much that goes into these productions.
Most of it is the writing. I would say if this one, I spent about a month and a half editing. And that was doing at least an hour a night for most, maybe 4 to 6 days a week. Mm-hmm. Do an hour a night, because it's so time consuming. You an hour, it sounds like it's not a lot. Mm-hmm. And it probably really actually isn't, because after that hour is over, you might get 15 seconds sounding good.
Right.
So it is aggravating. It is slow. It is,
Right, but again, the product is speaking for itself.
Right. And I want people to, listen to... look, not everybody's going to like it. I understand that. I've heard that. But this isn't for them. This is for the person who's not already into this stuff. And it's not that the person who's already into it can't enjoy it. Because, obviously, they watch movies. They like entertainment that has to do with things that they love. But really, my hope is that the person who's never been into this, has never even thought about this, somehow stumbles upon this and listens to it and goes, well, this wasn't very boring. And so maybe these stories aren't really that boring. Maybe, I just need to look into it more with a different set of eyes or different set of ears or whatever it is. And then that, once you've been lured in by the gimmicks and bells and whistles of this, well, then you listen to the Ask a Guide episodes.
Yeah. Well, if this is the first time that you are listening to anything from Addressing Gettysburg and you've heard some of these clips or what we've talked about, definitely check out the narrative episodes. If you go onto any of your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, all of them, it's out there. Definitely check out these narrative episodes. If you listen to them already, listen to them again, because I think you've just created a bigger picture, even beyond the what you're telling in the battle. There's a story about the making, and I think that's just as I was gonna say just as impressive. I don't know if we can go there, but it's
just as impressive as the history.
As the history,
no, it's not impressive at all.
Not quite.
It is impressive. Well, not that impressive.
Yeah,
I guess if you consider that this is a hobby. I have other things to do,
right?
But it's a passion. I love it, and I know the feeling of that tingle that you get when you get into this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it with people who come to Gettysburg and taking a tour, and they come back, and I can just see the look on their face that the bug has gotten them. And I just want to spread that. Like, I'm trying to just get more people interested in this stuff and get more people to come visit here, because this is our national treasure down here. Not the Nicolas Cage movie, like an actual national treasure. And it belongs to all of us. And so everybody should come here. They should visit it. They should learn their history and take out of it what you will. If anything,
right?
But do it, and so if and I've heard it from people, and it makes me feel very good that they weren't into this stuff ever, or they were, but they went dormant and they stagnated, and then they found our Instagram and then our podcast, and then all of a sudden now their passion for it has been reignited, and now they're coming back to visit for the first time in 9 years, and the best part of that is they want to buy me dinner.
Yeah.
Well, Matthew.
And that's
no, but what I'm saying is like that right there is like, it makes me feel so good, because that's what I wanted to have happen from this, is that people get into it.
Right. And I'm going to say, just knowing you for this many years, I know that you will do anything to drag anyone to Gettysburg. Before you moved here, it was always, let's go to Gettysburg. Oh, you want to go? I'm going. Let's go with me. Like, you were always doing that, and now you've just really found this way to reach a much, much larger audience to draw them in.
And it's a lot easier than dragging people.
And what's great is that the people who can't get to Gettysburg, or they can only come once a year, or they live far away, or they live in... I mean, the podcast has gone international. It's huge in Western Europe, Australia. There's parts of the Middle East where it's been downloaded.
Yeah, that's got to be army bases.
Maybe, but I mean, it's this reach of people that can't come here. You're bringing Gettysburg to them,
right?
And you're doing it through the narrative episodes. And in the next part of this series, we're just going to briefly talk about some of the other things that we're doing at Addressing Gettysburg with the Ask a Gettysburg Guide, also the lecture series with the National Park Service or Tim Smith. So we're going to touch on that a little bit, and then some of the battlefield walks as well. So, again, thank you. Oh, wait, Bob.
Matt, I know you listen to thousands and thousands of sound bites in order to pick just a few, right?
Right.
And you need to know that those other sound bites have not died in vain. That you have produced really good work.
Oh, well,
thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. You just wait until we get to Pickett's Charge.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And there's so much more to go.
Oh,
that's the thing. There's so much more to go.
These are the small battles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait until you get to the real battle.
So, again, thank you for sharing this insight. Thank you, Bob, again. Join us for part 3 of this. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back and do that. And if you haven't listened to the podcast yet, find it. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook. You can find a lot of the links there to the podcast. So definitely download it. And if you like what you hear, if you're already a fan, please become a patron. Help support this. This is how we can get episodes out quicker. Thank you for that. One last one.
Or Pete'll shoot you.
Thanks, guys.
Think outside the bus and let Getty's Bike Tours show you the only way to truly experience Gettysburg. There's a reason why Getty's Bike Tours is the longest running bicycle tour company in Gettysburg, and that's because they put the customer's experience at the top of their list of priorities. Follow a licensed battlefield guide through some of the most legendary ground in American history. There's a tour route for everyone, from the newbie to the hardcore history buff. So go to gettysbike.com or call 717-752-7752 and book your reservation today. Mention Addressing Gettysburg and receive 10% off your tour. That's gettysbike.com or 717-752-7752. Discount does not apply to rentals.
My favorite place to go, Mason-Dixon Distillery. They create their award-winning spirits from grain grown on Gettysburg National Military Park, and they cook their comfort food from ingredients sourced from local farms. For great food, amazing drinks, engaging conversation, and plenty of on-site parking, which is really hard to find here in Gettysburg, head over to Mason-Dixon Distillery, located at 331 East Water Street. Mention you heard this ad on Addressing Gettysburg and get a free dessert with any meal. That's right, I said free, just because you mentioned this show. That's Mason-Dixon Distillery, 331 East Water Street, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
What's up, guys? My name's John. I am the tattooed historian. And if you want friction-free history, edgy, new, exciting, you're going to want to check out my podcast, The Tattooed Historian Show, on iTunes or Spotify.
Victorian Photography Studio, located on Steinwar Avenue in historic downtown Gettysburg, is a vintage tintype and digital portrait studio. With hundreds of dresses and uniforms, as well as period-correct props and backgrounds, VPS can help you capture the perfect moment in time. As one of the few remaining practitioners of the craft, the photographers at VPS are trained in the history and artistry of wet plate collodion photography. So stop on in or book online for a truly unique Gettysburg experience. Go to VictorianPhotographyStudio.com and follow them on Facebook and Instagram at VPS_Gettysburg. That's VictorianPhotographyStudio.com and at VPS_Gettysburg on social media.
Hey, this is Avery Lentz of Battles and Banter Podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and other listening platforms. Give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Battles and Banter. If you like funny banter and good history, this is the podcast for you.
Life lessons from American history. Here's one you can use today for personal growth.
Gettysburg Lessons with one of 3 valuable lessons from Charles Knapp. Do what you ought to do. Life is a creative tension between what's in it for me and what you ought to do, between what you know and what you ought to know, between what you think and what you ought to think, between what you accept and what you ought to fight for. Freedom beckons you to do what you want to do, but responsibility tells you what you ought to do. Success is the union of the freedom to exercise your talents and the responsibility to use those talents wisely. Doing what you ought to do is the ideal influence. It is leadership in motion.
To get the full classroom course of Gettysburg Lessons, go to GettysburgLessons.com/schools.
Dog tags in the Civil War, one of the most devastating Union defeats took place in Florida, Confederate Lancers in New Mexico, a camel as a regimental mascot. Learn this and more on the Untold Civil War podcast, available on iTunes, Spotify, and Buzzsprout website.
Are you a Civil War reenactor in need of a Corps badge, ID disc, or personal item to perfect your historical impression? Or are you a history buff who is in need of a small conversation piece? Shop with the badge maker at CivilWarCorpsBadges.com, where you will find unique insignias and more from the Civil War and 19th century. Display some handmade patriotism today and shop at CivilWarCorpsBadges.com. That's Corps, spelled CORPS.